The rain hammered against the windows of the old Victorian house as 17-year-old Madison scrolled through her phone, ignoring her mother's final warning, echoing in her head, "Never stay home alone in this house, Madison, not even for one night." But here she was, alone, because she'd convinced her parents she was mature enough to handle it while they visited her sick grandmother across town. The house felt different without her family's presence. Bigger, quieter, like it was holding its breath. Madison had always felt uncomfortable in this house. They'd moved here 3 years ago, when her father inherited it from his great-uncle, a strange old man she'd only met once. He'd given her the creeps with his yellow teeth, and the way he stared at her without blinking. Her parents never talked about why he'd died alone in this house, or why it had sat empty for 2 years before they moved in. At 9 p.m., Madison was watching Netflix in the living room. When the power flickered, the old house often had electrical issues during storms, so she didn't think much of it. But then it flickered again, and again, like someone was playing with the lights. She got up to check the windows, making sure they were all locked. Her mother had drilled this into her. Always check the locks. Always keep the curtains drawn at night. As she pulled the curtain closed in the front room, Madison could have sworn she saw a figure standing across the street under the old oak tree, just standing there in the rain, not moving. She blinked, and it was gone. Probably just her imagination playing tricks on her. The storm was making weird shadows everywhere. By 9:30, the power went out completely. Madison's phone flashlight cut through the darkness as she made her way to the basement to check the circuit breaker. The wooden stairs creaked under her feet, each step echoing in the silence. The basement always smelled musty and old, like something had died down there long ago. She found the breaker box and flipped the main switch. Nothing. She tried again, wiggling the handle, and finally the lights came back on, flooding the basement with harsh fluorescent light. That's when she saw it. A wet footprint on the concrete floor that definitely wasn't hers. The print was large, much larger than her size 7 feet, and it was fresh. Water was still pooling around the edges. Madison's heart started racing. She followed the trail of prints with her eyes. They led from the small basement window to the stairs. Someone had broken in while she was upstairs. But that was impossible. The basement window was tiny and high up, barely big enough for a child to crawl through, and it had been painted shut for years. Madison approached the window and saw that the paint had been scraped away, and the latch was broken. Fresh mud was smeared on the windowsill. Back upstairs, Madison grabbed a baseball bat from her brother's room and methodically checked every door and window in the house. All locked. She tried calling her parents, but the storm had knocked out the cell towers. The landline was dead too. She was completely cut off from the outside world. The isolation pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. As she walked through the living room, Madison noticed something that made her blood run cold. The family photos on the mantelpiece had been turned face down, all 7 of them. She was absolutely certain they'd been upright when her parents left. She'd been looking at them just hours ago, remembering last year's vacation to the beach. With trembling hands, Madison slowly turned each photo back up. In every single picture, someone had scratched out the faces with something sharp, leaving deep gouges in the glass. But the scratches weren't random. They formed letters. In the first photo, "Y." In the second, "A." By the time she reached the last photo, the message was clear. "WATCHING." Madison spun around, scanning the dark corners of the room, her grip tightening on the baseball bat. The shadows seemed to move and shift in the lamplight. She could feel eyes on her, boring into her back, but there was nothing there. Just the old furniture and the family portraits with their scratched-out faces. At 10:15, a soft thud came from upstairs, then another, slow, deliberate footsteps in her parents' bedroom. Madison's heart hammered against her ribs. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The footsteps moved across the room, then stopped. Complete silence. "Hello," Madison called out, her voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The silence stretched on. Maybe it was just the house settling. Old houses made all kinds of noises during storm, but then she heard it. The distinct creak of her parents' bedroom door opening. Madison gripped the baseball bat tighter and started up the stairs, each step feeling like she was walking toward her own doom. The hallway stretched before her like a dark tunnel. Her parents' bedroom door was now slightly ajar, though she was certain it had been closed when she'd checked earlier. She pushed the door open with the tip of the bat. The room appeared empty, but something was wrong. The window was wide open, rain soaking the carpet and curtain. Madison was absolutely certain that window had been locked when she'd done her security check. As she approached to close it, she saw muddy handprints on the white windowsill, handprints that were much too large to be hers. The handprints were still wet, fresh. Someone had climbed in from outside just minutes ago, but how? Her parents' bedroom was on the second floor. There was no tree close enough to climb, no ladder, no fire escape, unless someone had somehow scaled the side of the house like a spider. Behind her, the bedroom door slammed shut with a bang that shook the entire room. Madison spun around and grabbed the handle, twisting frantically. It wouldn't budge. She was trapped. The handle felt ice cold under her palm, so cold it almost burned. She threw her shoulder against the door, but it was like hitting solid concrete. That's when she heard it. A low whisper, coming from inside the walk-in closet. "Madison," the voice was raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken in years, like vocal cords that were dry and cracked. "I've been waiting for you to come home." The closet door slowly creaked open on its own. Madison pressed her back against the locked bedroom door, raising the bat with shaking hands. A shadow moved behind the hanging clothes. Then a figure stepped out, tall, impossibly thin, with pale skin that looked like it had never seen sunlight. Its limbs were too long, joints bending at unnatural angles. Its face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. But it was the eyes that made Madison's blood freeze, completely black, like looking into deep wells. "Your family tried to keep me away," the thing whispered, taking a step closer with movements that didn't quite look human. Its feet didn't make any sound on the carpet. "But you invited me in when you broke the rules, when you stayed alone." Madison realized with growing horror that this was why her mother had warned her never to stay alone. The house had a history, a dark secret her parents had been protecting her from. Her great-uncle hadn't died of old age. Something had taken him, and now it wanted her. "What do you want?" Madison managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. The thing smiled, and Madison saw teeth filed to sharp points, like a shark's mouth. "I want what I've always wanted, a family, someone to stay with me forever. Your great-uncle was so lonely at the end. He begged me to take him, but you're young, strong, you'll last much longer." Madison suddenly understood. The wet footprints, the scratched photos, the unlocked window. It had all been a game. The thing had been playing with her, like a cat with a mouse. It could have taken her at any time, but it wanted her to be afraid first. It fed on fear. With a burst of adrenaline, Madison smashed the bedroom window with the baseball bat, glass exploding outward into the storm. Without hesitation, she climbed out onto the slippery roof, cutting her hands on the broken glass. The wind nearly knocked her off balance, and the old shingles were treacherous in the rain. Behind her, she could hear the thing following, its fingers scraping against the roof like claws on a chalkboard. But when she looked back, she saw it moving in ways that defied physics, crawling along the walls and ceiling like gravity meant nothing to it. Madison slid down to the edge of the roof and dropped onto the porch awning below, the impact sending shockwaves through her knees. From there she jumped to the ground, her ankle twisting painfully as she landed in the muddy flower bed. She limped toward the neighbor's house, screaming for help, but their windows were all dark. Everyone on the street seemed to be asleep, and her screams were swallowed by the thunder. The porch light at the Hendersons' house was out, so was the street. It was like the darkness was following her,
spreading outward from her house like an infection. Madison banged on the Hendersons' door, but no one answered. She tried the Garcias' house next door. Same thing. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been drained of life. When Madison looked back at her house, she saw the pale figure standing in her parents' bedroom window, watching her with those terrible black eyes. But then she noticed something that made her stomach drop. There were more figures in the other window. The kitchen window, her brother's room, the attic. The house was full of them, and they were all looking at her with the same hungry expression. Madison's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands and saw a text from an unknown number. "You can't run from us forever. We know where you live. We know your family. And now that you've seen us, we'll never let you go." She looked up at the house and saw that all the figures had vanished from the windows. The house looked normal again, warm and inviting, like nothing had happened. But Madison knew better. She turned to run down the street, but they were already there, surrounding her in the rain like ghosts made solid. There were dozens of them, men, women, children, all with that same pale skin and those black bottomless eyes. Some were wearing clothes from different decades. A woman in a 1950s dress, a man in a Victorian suit, children in old-fashioned school uniforms. These weren't just random monsters. They were everyone who had ever lived in that house, everyone who had stayed alone and been taken. "Welcome to the family," the original creature said, its voice now coming from all of them at once. A chorus of the damned. "Your great-uncle is here too. He's been waiting to meet you properly." From the crowd stepped a familiar figure, her great-uncle, looking exactly as she remembered him, but with those same black eyes. He smiled with teeth that were now sharp points, and Madison understood that he hadn't died in that house. He'd been transformed, made into one of the— "I'm sorry, little one," her great-uncle said in a voice like rustling leaves, "but it's the only way to never be alone again. Your parents will understand eventually, when they come home tomorrow and find you missing. The loneliness will eat at them, and lonely people make such easy prey." The last thing Madison saw before everything went black was that terrible smile spreading across a dozen faces, those sharp teeth gleaming in the lightning, and the realization that her mother's warning hadn't been about staying alone. It had been about what happens when you're not alone anymore, when something else moves in with you forever. The next morning, Madison's parents returned to find the house exactly as they'd left it. Clean, tidy, normal. But Madison was nowhere to be found. The only trace of her was a note on the kitchen table written in her careful handwriting. "I'm not alone anymore, and I never will be again. Don't worry about me. I'm with family now." The police searched for weeks. They found the broken bedroom window, the muddy footprints in the basement, the scratched family photos, but they couldn't explain any of it. The case went cold after 3 months, but Madison's parents knew. They'd known about the house's history all along, about the people who had disappeared over the decades. They'd thought they could protect her by never leaving her alone. They'd thought the old stories were just superstition. Sometimes, on stormy nights, neighbors swear they can see figures moving behind the windows of the old Victorian house. A young girl who looks like Madison, standing with a crowd of pale strangers, all of them watching the street with eyes that reflect no light. And if you're foolish enough to walk by that house alone after dark, you might hear them whispering your name, inviting you to join their eternal family. The house is empty now, officially for sale, but the realtor can never seem to show it to anyone. Potential buyers cancel their appointments at the last minute, claiming they had the strangest dreams about being watched. The few who do make it to the front door never stay long. They say the house feels crowded, even when it's supposed to be empty. And every night when the sun goes down, the lights in the house come on by themselves, as if someone, or many someones, still call it home.